Okay, so now this is, again, Thursday, the 7th of June, second session, and I'm going to start assignment B. So what I've done is I took what I finished for assignment A, I did a file save as, and I called it the same thing, House B. Now, if you're following along with me in class, you can save it as House B-test in class or something like that, and then you can go back when you finished 100% of A, save it again as your B, and then work from start to finish of assignment B if you like. So, first thing the assignment says is we want to set the wall heights for our exterior walls. And I didn't bother to mention what view to be in on this, but you can either be in a plan or a 3D. Well, let's just work in 3D because that way you can see exactly what's going on with your wall heights.
How would you go back to plan?
Well, first of all, I want to see how many views do I even have open. I don't remember. So if you go to the, well, let me collapse this little help. The quick access toolbar, which is quicker than going to view and finding it, this little button right here is switch windows, and it will show you all the windows that are open. So that tells me I've got my House B file open, and in that file I've got a floor plan, work level 1, and a 3D view. But because the check mark is by 3D, that means that's the one I'm controlling. And because the other one is completely hidden, I can go to the other one either by clicking on it here, or I can do Control-Tab. So I'm going to Control-Tab back to the 3D, and if I don't need the plan now, I can go up here to this little Close Hidden Windows, and now I'm down to just the one plan view on the screen. I can tell which view I have open and I'm controlling by looking at the browser and seeing that the 3D view with the little braces around it is blacked in. That's the view that I've got. It'll always be bolded in on the browser for you to tell. It'll also be written at the very top here, and it's just too small on this stupid projector monitor. But it will actually say HD Smith Arc 124 House B, and then space, and then floor plan, and then work, or actually 3D view, and then 3D with the braces around it. Now this little 3D with the braces view is a default that you can get to by this little house button, or the same house button on the view tab of the ribbon. And so if you create a new project and there's no view, like I'm going to go back to my plan, just show this real quick. Close it in. If I delete that little 3D view that says 3D and braces, it's gone. But the next time I hit this 3D view button here, it creates that default view and pulls it up on the screen. Now I have to change it back to shaded because when it created it, it did 8 scale and so on. So I'm going to change it to fine level of detail, shaded, and 1/2 inch equals a foot. So now we want to take the exterior walls and we want to make them taller. Now there's several properties of a wall that determine exactly how tall it is, and it's not just a height, it's more than that. So let's pick one of these brick walls on the outside, and when you select it, the property spot says, okay, here are the properties of that wall instance. So first of all, you'll see that there's a location line. We've talked about that. Now there's a base constraint and a base offset, and a top constraint and a top offset, which is grayed out right now because it says unconnected height. So the word unconnected is a little bit confusing in Revit because they use it within two contexts here, and I wish their terminology was a little clearer. What I would say is, instead of unconnected height, it should really say, if the top constraint says not measured from a level, just from where the bottom of the wall is, then this unconnected height should say, you're specifying exactly how tall the wall is, not where the top is in relation to a level. It's better to specify on exterior walls especially the height by saying, okay, where based on position to level 1 is the bottom of the wall. So we say base constraint is first floor, the offset is 0. The top, we change the top constraint. Instead of being unconnected, we want it to be constrained to the plate height level. Now, the unconnected height is grayed out, and it really should now change to read measured height, because you can't change the unconnected height when you're saying I'm constraining it to a level and an offset. So that really should read measured height, 18'8". But I want the top to be offset 0 from the plate height. So when I change that 4 inches to 0 and hit enter, then it says, okay, your measured height is 18'4" instead of 18'8". Now, when you do something in the Properties palette, let me undo that and do it again. Control Z. When you change properties over here, this Properties palette is a little touchy. And I had to get used to it when they came out with it in version 2011, I think it was, 10 or 11. What happens is when you change one of these numbers, be really careful about not having your mouse move the pointer away from that palette until you're all done. Because if I say I change something and I'm not done and I move out here, it applies the changes. Notice how there's an apply button. Right now it's grayed out. So if I say top constraint should be plate height, and then top constraint should be 0, and I can hit enter. Now, if I hit the apply button while I'm still in the palette, it makes that change. Let me do it again with this wall, though. If I come in here and I say top constraint, plate height, top offset 0, if instead of hitting apply, I just move my pointer from the palette over into the screen, then it applies the changes and apply gets grayed out. So it's a little quirky about that. It takes some getting used to, but it's kind of handy because if you move on to do other things, just move your pointer. But what you don't want to do is be working on like a slope drafting table and then your mouse kind of slides. And then it's like, stuck it. So you got to really get the mouse to sit still. Another instance where you want the mouse to sit still is if you're trying to hover and tab and say, well, I want to tab and select the chain of walls or just that wall. If you hover and the right thing is blue and then you move before you click, you could be selecting the wrong thing. So make sure that when you're hovering and tabbing, after you tab to get the right thing pre-highlighted, don't move your mouse, just click the button. And now you've selected what it was you were trying to select, which in this case is those other two walls. Now I could also come over here and tap tab and get that chain of walls. Now if I hold control, it will add that chain as soon as I click to the others. So now I've got all 5, 6, 7 of the remaining brick walls selected. And I can go in here and say, okay, top constraint. Well, why is that blank? Well, because I still have the original walls that I've already raised selected. So some of them are constrained to the plate height. Some of them are unconstrained. And that's why it's blank. Anything that's shared by all the selected elements will be shown explicitly. Anything that's not the same, it leaves blank. So then I can say, okay, I want to change the top constraint of all of those, regardless of what it is, to plate height. And the top offset needs to be consistently 0. So now, if I either hit apply or I just move out there, it applies that change to the walls. So to kind of review about, remember, I'm going to hammer this terminology into your head. Revit talks about a category, and then a family, and then a type, and then an instance, in that order from top to bottom. So the category we're dealing with is wall. The family we're dealing with, a little trickier. If you hover over one of those and see what it says it is, it'll say walls. So what's the family? Basic wall. And then what's the type? It's that exterior brick 12, plaster 113. So it separates the category and the family and the type with colons when you either point to it and hover over it, or it should show up in the properties palette. And it says basic wall. So there's your family, there's your type. And then below that it says walls, and it even tells you how many walls you have selected. So if I selected 3 different walls, now notice when I select 3 walls, it says wall, basic wall, so they're all the same family, but multiple types selected, and it says walls 4. So I have 4 walls, and they're not all 4 the same wall type. So that's how the properties palette works. So now we've got our walls to the right height. That was step 1.
What was the top offset? What did that?
I set it to 0, and what that means is if I want the top of my walls to be measured 2 feet above the plate height, then I say plus 2 feet for the offset. Like if you have a flat roof building with a parapet that goes 3 feet around above the roof, you might say I want the top of that wall to go to the roof level plus 3 foot or 3'6" or whatever. And that way, if you were to raise the height of the roof, the top of those walls goes up so that it stays 3 feet above the top of the roof level. Now the beauty of doing that is not just that when you move the top moves. If instead I looked at the height and I did my math and I said, well, that should be 18'4" high. See how it's grayed out and it says 18'4". So if I change it from plate height to unconnected, and I leave the unconnected height at 18'4", then what happens if I decide that I want my brick to come down a foot below the floor level? That doesn't mean I want the top of the wall to go down. I just want to bring brick further down. So if I select it and say the offset for the base is -1 foot, it moves the top down because it's unconnected 18'4". In other words, that's an explicit height. Regardless of where the bottom of the wall is, the top will be exactly 18'4" above it. It's better to say, okay, I want it to be 0 from the plate height, and right now it happens to measure at 18'4". But when I'm done, I might change things, and I want that top to stay where it is. So if I do that, and I say let's offset the base at 1 foot, the wall is now 19'4" high, but the top stays measured from what it is. So there's always different ways to skin a cat, and there's lots of different ways to do the same thing in Revit, but you want to pick the way that's the most coordinated, because then you get the benefit of being able to revise things easily. In fact, if I want to raise the height of the roof now, I can go to an elevation view. I'll go to the existing south elevation, click on this plate height, and let's raise it from 18'4" to 23 feet. See how the top of all my walls go up with it, all my exterior walls, and now that wall is measuring at 23 feet high. So I can undo that because that was just a test. Close hidden. So that finishes the step 1 of the handout, and then step 2 is going to be to create, 2 and 3 are how to create the foundation walls. Step 4 is the footings, and then 5 is going to be the last step. So this assignment is quicker than assignment A. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and stop this recording. Got the wrong window here. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a break for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And during the break, I'm going to answer any questions anybody has if you're getting stuck on anything. This is session 2. First